This session is Rural Grants 101, how county officials can tap into USDA programs. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning for the NACo Rural Grants Workshop. My name is Melissa Cribbins, and I serve as a county commissioner in Coos County, Oregon. I also serve as chair of the NACo Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee and vice chair of the Rural Action Caucus. This morning, we are going to highlight the federal grants, loans, and technical assistance aimed to local governments and examine complexities associated with obtaining those valuable resources. We're excited to be joined by three special guests this morning. Chad Roop currently serves as the administrator for USDA's Rural Utilities Service. The Rural Utilities Service provides much needed infrastructure improvements to rural communities, including water and wastewater, electric power, and telecommunication services. Chad Parker serves as Deputy Administrator for Community Programs at USDA Rural Development, which offers a variety of programs to build or improve housing and essential community facilities in rural areas. These resources include loans, grants, and loan guarantees for single and multifamily housing, child care centers, police and fire stations, hospitals, libraries, nursing homes, schools, first responder vehicles and equipment, housing for farm laborers, and more. Sammy Zaror serves as Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Grants Division within USDA's Rural Business Cooperative Service. The RBCS provides capital, training, education, and entrepreneurial skills to help those living in rural areas start and grow businesses or find jobs in agricultural markets and the bio-based economy. To get things moving this morning, I'm going to turn over the program to each of our guests to provide a brief overview of the programs throughout their mission area before we examine the complexities of applying for those resources. Mr. Root?
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.
Good morning. I see a lot of familiar faces, so that's encouraging. How many folks here have used Rural Utility Services resources in the past? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, it gives me an idea of kind of what we're working with. First of all, rural development is housed in USDA, and as an overall agency, we consist of our three agencies within that agency in the department. We handle projects for population centers of under 50,000. So that's a broad definition of rural. Now with each one of our agencies in different programs, we have different population thresholds. So those are some things that I think are unique and require attention. One of the wonderful things about USDA Rural Development is that we have over 200 field offices located throughout the United States, and we have 47 state directors to help deliver those programs and lead the local community efforts as you guys look to build out different projects. So as you walk away from here, there's a few things that I think that you need to take note of, and one of them is, of course, the website, rd.usda.gov. And then the other piece is making sure that you're contacting our state directors. When you go under Rural Development's website, you'll see a list for leadership, and you'll see there for state directors. And I think it's important that you be willing to reach out and communicate with the state directors, because oftentimes they're the local presidentially appointed political leadership for our state offices to help deliver on your needs and answer questions you may have. We have over 40 different programs between the three different agencies, so it's something that can get very confusing very quickly, and there's no way that you're going to be able to absorb all of this information that we're going to talk about here in the next hour. And so those pieces of information I think are very important. I represent Rural Utility Service, and really rural development started in the 1930s under the New Deal, under FDR, and it was the Rural Electrification Act that really got our overall agencies started. And REA turned into Rural Utilities Service back in the mid-90s after a series of organizations. But the idea behind it was that it took federal government support to get the ranches and farms and rural communities electric power back then, and that went all the way into the 1950s, and believe it or not, it's still happening today in certain parts of the nation. There are certain areas where people don't even have sustainable power to this day, and that's something that is hard to believe, and that is happening in the United States, but it's something that we're dedicated to that mission. Fortunately, Congress gives us quite a bit of opportunity to be able to deliver on those services with a lot of funding. And so that's where we can pair up and be good stewards and good partners for you in that regard, depending on what you're trying to achieve. In my agency, I run rural electric, rural telecom, and rural water and wastewater and solid waste. So those are kind of the main focuses on my agency. In the rural electric program, we have traditionally worked with the rural electric cooperatives to help deliver generation, transmission, and distribution services. What's unique is that as we go into the telecom and we're dealing with broadband, which is a very hot topic these days, it's housed within my agency, we're also, and handling water and wastewater, we're seeing these utilities get out of their siloed approach to solving problems for people, and they're starting to create opportunities through partnership and unique operating agreements to help deliver on services that were once only considered to be a telecom kind of approach. Under the rural electric utilities, we get about $5.5 billion every year to deliver throughout the United States, and that portion of my portfolio is a $44 billion portfolio. So we have a lot of impact in rural communities if you're in a rural electric cooperative area, and then also we have investor-owned utilities who do business with us as well, and we hit the full spectrum. We do everything with all of the above generation sources. So if you're looking for solar, renewable energy, anything of that nature through your electric utility provider, we can accommodate that. We can also accommodate carbon sequestration when it is factored into a viable project that is sustainable. We are a bank, we are a government bank. We do a lot of loans, but we also have a lot of grants as well to help match that up. In the rural water program, we have about $600 million every year in our traditional program for construction on projects. And we usually try to match that up with our $1.4 billion that we get in loan money to help build out those projects. Under the rural electric and rural telecom, the population limits are for 20,000 and under, but our rural water program is for 10,000 and under in our direct program. So those are some of the main highlights. Now I will mention one last item, broadband. Reconnect has been a very popular pilot program that we received from Congress. So far, we're just finishing up our first round, and we have 83 awards for $751 million in 34 states. We had $1.4 billion in applications from 146 applicants late last year, and we're finishing that round up. We have round two that closes on March 16th for $550 million in awards, and then Congress gave us another $555 million worth of awards. So we're really trying to make an impact for rural America. There's a discussion about the digital divide between the haves and have-nots, and oftentimes it's turned into rural versus urban. So we're trying to close that gap. We're trying to be good stewards and good partners with taxpayer funds by building it once, building it right, and then moving on to the next project. So we want to make sure when we're putting stuff in the ground, it's going to last for years and affect generations of folks. And so that's where we've really focused our efforts. We're working well across the federal government as well with other agencies to try and accommodate the mapping effort when it comes to broadband, as well as being good partners. So I'll leave that as a broad overview on my agency. I realize that's a lot of ground we just covered, but we can go into more discussion on it as we proceed.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Parker, you're actually next.
Sure. I'm Chad Parker. Good morning. Work with Rural Housing Service under the Community Facilities Program. The Community Facilities Program provides a broad array of facilities. The people who are eligible are public bodies, nonprofit, and Native American tribes. And we've got a large grouping of funding that are available through the programs. The way our portfolio, we've got about a $10.4 billion loan and grant portfolio that's set out. About 48% of it is in healthcare, hospitals, health clinics, those type of facilities, mental health facilities. About 10% of it is in public buildings, things like courthouses or town hall facilities. 28% of it is in educational facilities, K through 12, community colleges, some private universities, some Head Start child care centers. About 9% of it's in public safety, so your fire, your rescue, your police facilities. and about 5% of it is other facilities, things like building on a fairgrounds that a community wanted to build. So it's a pretty broad array of facilities that are eligible under the program, and we've got a pretty broad array of funding types that are available. The first three are the community facilities direct loan, guaranteed loan, and grants. They're kind of the basics of the program. Under the direct loan program, the eligible population is up to 20,000. So we can go into unincorporated areas or cities or towns up to 20,000 in population. And under that program, I've got about $2.5 billion in funding available. So the direct loans can go up to 40 years or the life of the facility. We don't make that many 40-year loans. Usually a building is 30 or 35 years, or if you're looking at equipment, it's certainly less than that. So we go in and typically fund construction of buildings, renovation of buildings, or the purchase of equipment through the direct loan program. We've got $2.5 billion available under it. We used about $900 million last year. The interest rate for that program is a fixed interest rate for the term of the loan. Right now, our fixed interest rate is 2.75%. It changes quarterly based upon the bond buyer's index, I guess the 20-year. And it's trending towards, on April 1st, being 2.5, but right now it's 2 3/4 if you locked in today. So we have that 2.5 billion available in guarantee in direct. We have 500 million available in guarantee. The population's a little bit different under the guarantee program. We can go up to the 20,000 population for $325 million of the program. But for $175 million of the program, we can go into communities up to that 50,000 population, not in urbanized areas adjacent to communities larger than 50,000. So there's some caveats in there. So we can go into towns and cities less than 50,000 and into the unincorporated areas except for what I call like the densely populated suburbs. We can't go into those. So the guarantee program, the interest rate's negotiated between the lender and the borrower. USDA just comes in and puts a loan note guarantee for the lender to say if they don't get paid back, that we'll pay a certain percentage of the loan back. There's a fee associated with the guarantee. It's called a guarantee fee that the lender pays. They usually pass it on to the borrower. It's about 1.5% upfront fee with an annual fee of 0.5% on the outstanding balance. So there's about $500 million available. There is $500 million available this year in the guarantee program. Under our grant program, our regular community facility grants, we've got $30 million available for this fiscal year. We allocate that out to the states, a good portion of it, to those state offices and state directors that Mr. Roop spoke about. So they go out to those offices, people will come in and apply for the grants. Average size grant's about $50,000 for under the community facilities grants program. So what you're looking at there is it's typically more equipment related. Either a portion of a fire truck or a portion of a police car or equipment inside of a school classroom, something like that. Equipment for a healthcare clinic. Those are the three basic programs, but then I've got about 3 or 4 others. There's one called the Rural Community Development Initiative Grants. It's a Train the Trainer grant. We have $6 million available for that program this year. There's a dollar for dollar cash match. It typically goes out to universities or community colleges or nonprofits that are doing things like board training across counties. So they would come in and apply to USDA. We would provide a grant. They would match it for dollar, and they would take those funds to go around and, say, train 20 groups of board members across the state, something along those lines. We have tribal college grants that go to the 1990 universities. There's a group of 1990 land-grant universities that are named tribal colleges. We have about $5 million in available for funds, typically go into facilities or equipment located on buildings on their campuses. We have also a program called the Community Facilities Technical and Training Assistance Grants. So there's applicants that are putting together applications for the community facilities program out there, especially some small nonprofits that need help. So you have organizations that come in and apply for these technical assistance grants. We've got $1.5 million available for that this year. And they can get $150,000 to the organization that's going to provide the assistance to the applicant who's going to put together an application for the CF program. So if you have a small nonprofit that's working on a Head Start facility and they're having problems getting their financial statements together, this group could use our grant funding under the technical assistance and training grants to provide some technical assistance to that Head Start applicant who's developing an application for the CF program. So that's kind of the broad array of what we have available in the community facilities program. We do have some disaster funding available that is available for those areas impacted by major disasters that occurred in FY 2018 and 2019. About $150 million in grants, but you've got to be inside one of those disaster declared counties. We also have 2 handbooks out that we've got out on our website that I wanted to point you to. One is our Transportation Infrastructure Handbook. It kind of goes through airports and roads and bridges and how to apply for community facility funding for that. And then we've also got a community facilities application guide out there, just so for regular applications, how to put those together for our program. So I think that's a good bit on our resources. So
Great. Thank you, Mr. Zura.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. I just wanted to stress that our state offices, it's really the first point of contact for many of our programs. I'm at the Rural Business Cooperative Service. So, what we do every day is try to impact rural communities to increase jobs and start businesses. And there's like more than 16 programs and set aside, so it can be a little confusing. I'm going to highlight a few of them. But please explore our websites, and also if you have a project and you're wondering how it would qualify, or you might not understand exactly, please contact the state office, and they'd be more than happy to help you. Or you can contact us at the national office. I want to highlight the first is the Rural Business Development Grant. That's RBDG, it's also known as, and it's simply business development. It targets technical assistance or training or other activities that lead to expanding or starting a business and a small business. So it wouldn't be more than 50 employees and the revenue of no more than $1 million. Those grants are usually as small as $10,000 or up to $500,000. And they really can, a lot of different projects can be eligible for those grants, and that includes technical assistance, counseling, acquisition, development, capitalization of revolving loan funds, rural transportation, feasibility studies for business expansion, and so on. And these are competitive grants. That means, there's a certain time when they're due, and you're competing with other applicants, and some of the criteria for getting points on the application is evidence showing the job creation impact, the percent of non-federal funding committed to the project, also the economic need in the area are some of the things we look at. Also, the Farm Bill this December 2018 had a strategic economic and community development program, and that basically gives you extra priority points for certain programs that we have to, if you can demonstrate that the project impacts more, at least 2 townships or jurisdictions, and also you need to meet the underlying requirements of the program. But that's something else you can look for. It's called SEC-D, or Strategic Economic and Community Development. This past Friday, there was a notice that came out related to that gave you more information on details on that. Also, another big thing we do at Rural Business Cooperative Service is the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program. And this basically is private credit guaranteeing. We guarantee the loans of private credit for all sorts of projects that impact creating businesses and improvements and equipment, and there's a lot that goes on there, and those loans are like in millions of dollars to a lot smaller ones. But again, you can explore the website for more information on that. I want to highlight the Intermediary Relending Program, and that's a program, again, that provides a low interest loan to the intermediary that's as low as 1%. And it's for a 30-year revolving loan fund. And then the intermediary makes loans to the ultimate recipient for about $250,000 is the max for those the ultimate recipient loan. And finally, I want to highlight this is a mouthful, the Biorefinery Renewable Chemical and Bio-Based Product Manufacturing Assistance Program. So basically, it's the short, we call it the 9003 program. It provides loan guarantees for biorefineries, conversion for renewable energies, for bio-based products, and so on. And again, please explore our website for more information on that. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for those remarks. And I don't know about you guys, but it got me thinking about different projects that I would love to talk about later. And so many of these programs have different eligibility requirements, including population caps. Can you guys talk about the reasons why USDA has different funding requirements for different programs?
Sure, I'll take that. I think the biggest reason is because it's what Congress provided a statute, so that's pretty simple. But the underlying piece to that is that you look at why are those populations, why did they come to that determination? A lot of it was because of the demand versus what was available, and so making sure that the people in greatest need are receiving the biggest opportunity. There's something things change. One of the biggest changes we had this last year, or in the Farm Bill, I should say, we're already a little over a year past that now. But under our WEP Guaranteed program, that population limit was raised to 50,000. So a lot of folks here probably deal with EPA and the Clean Water Fund, the Drinking Water Fund, and oftentimes more populous areas get a lot of that funding. And so traditionally, our WEP direct loan and grant program went to populations of 10,000 and under. Well, if you're sitting in a population center of 15 to 20,000 people, you're kind of like what I call the middle kid in the family. You're kind of the one that's kind of forgotten about. The young kid gets all the attention, the older ones kind of get what they need, and the middle kid gets forgotten. And this guaranteed loan program is much like the community facilities loan program or the B&I program, where we provide a guarantee to a financial institution, could be a community-owned bank, where, like the industry I came from before coming into this, to be able to offer that assistance to where if you're really in need and you want to go after it, we can throw a guarantee on a loan, and it may make that community bank be able to do a deal that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do because of their lending limits or something of that nature, and really invest in the community and allow you to move forward with a project that otherwise would sit and not get done. So that's the biggest reason for a lot of them. You look at some of these, they were all passed during different time frames, different eras, and so sometimes those population limits just never changed.
Okay. So with so many different programs, it can be kind of daunting to figure out where to begin. Do you have any advice for local elected officials on where they should begin their search for available resources besides Google, which is
State
what we all
director.
do now?
There's a reason that the president appointed 47 state directors throughout the United States. We want to make sure that you're getting what you need, and it has, oftentimes if you have, no offense, I used to be a career staff, so please don't take offense in saying this, but oftentimes you have to have political will to get something done, whether that's at the local level or higher up, and so this ensures that somebody can pick up a phone and say, hey, we really need to focus here and try and find a solution. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the answer you necessarily want. It doesn't mean we're going to take a bad deal and make it good. It means that we might be able to find the right path and get you the answers that you need to be able to make the right decision. But remember, we have to be sustainable. As an agency and as taxpayers, I think you'd appreciate that. We want to make sure we're putting good tax dollars at work. We're not just throwing money at something that is a really bad situation. We want to truly create a solution, not just throw money at a problem. So.
That's really good advice. One of the small communities in my county, and USDA was hugely helpful to them in helping them figure out how to finance a project that they needed funding for. And I think it can be difficult for small communities, especially because you end up asking your ratepayers in this case to fund part of it, because it doesn't make sense for the federal government to come in and pay all of it.
Right. That partnership is so critical. You got to have the local willpower, the local leadership, but oftentimes it's going to take a series of federal agencies. We partner with the EPA a lot on water projects. They'll come in and they'll fund part of a project. We'll fund part of it. Then you might see the state government come in and fund part of it, and then the local folks might fund part of it initially up front, and then it gets repaid by a tax base in some sort. So there's, and I really, on the Reconnect program, I've really seen it's been a game changer, this broadband program that we've been dealing with nationwide. I've seen telephone companies partner with electric co-ops and partner with local municipalities. I've seen counties apply for funding. People are finding new solutions by partnering together and bringing skin in the game, as the secretary says. So.
Right. Great. Anybody else? Advice on connecting to resources?
No, state directors is the right answer.
That's the right answer.
Just go there. They've worked with all the programs. They know their local level. It's the smart person to reach out to first.
Perfect.
Yeah, and each state office also has a lot of staff that work there, and some of them have been there for years, and you may be redirected to meet with them. There's also the general field representatives, and there's a lot of resources, and also us at the national office, we're always ready to help.
Great. Thank you all. So once a resource has been identified as a possibility, what are the next steps that, say, a county commissioner should take towards applying for funding or technical assistance? And are there different processes for different programs, or is it kind of a one-stop shop?
So I think sure. It depends upon which program you're looking at. I mean, if you're looking at the water program, there's assistance out there. We have a National Rural Water Association. We have RCAP, which works with people who are putting together applications. If you're looking at a large CF hospital, $50 million is a real possibility. Right. That's a different kind of application that you're going to be putting together than if you're looking for a fire truck application.
Do you want to look at our financials more if we're asking for more money?
We dig into all kinds of financials and the management and that type of thing. But I think you're looking at a different group of professionals to help you put together a large hospital application versus maybe something for the local fire department. It's probably something that a community could put together on their own.
Great.
I would just point out that some of our grant programs, they come out at a certain time of year, and there's usually a public notice, so it's good to sign up for emails where you can find out when the notice is, and there's usually a window maybe of 60 or 90 days to apply for the program. So it doesn't mean they're typically the same from year to year, so you can always prepare in advance if you know you're interested in the program and not wait till the notice comes out. But there's always a lot going on and notices coming out.
I'll add one other comment to it as well, and that is that if you haven't used rural development services in the last 20 years and you're basing your decisions on something that, hey, we did business with them a long time ago and it was a bad experience, we don't want to go back, what I would say is this: times change, people change, and resources change, and we're becoming much modern in our program delivery and how we do business. So I would re-engage. If you haven't engaged in the last 20 years, re-engage and find out what resources you have available and how modernized we've delivered on our process. We're in the middle of continuing to deliver on that modernization as we move forward. So we're getting a lot better than we were 20 years ago. And I say that because that's how I was introduced when I was a community banker, who is a great resource for anyone here in this room as well. I did a B&I deal for a franchised hotel. And the reason I did it was because it fit well. And that I knew when I looked the career folks in the eye and said, will you guarantee this? They said yes, and they meant it. It wasn't, well, we're going to try and get out of it one day once we have to collect on it. They meant it. Fortunately, it was a good deal, but it was something where that local leadership makes a difference in these small communities. And know that your community bankers, your consultant engineers that do business with you on a routine basis, they're great resources. But if your consultant engineer hasn't worked with us in 20 years, have them come back and revisit it because it's worth the look.
Great. So now we're hoping for the insider baseball tips. Any special advice for people in this room on what they can do to make their application more likely to be successful? Do you look for partnerships? Do you just look for solid financials?
We're a bank. We're a government bank. So we, and I come from a banking industry, so the financials are important. If a loan is a loan, okay? We want good equity, good financials, and a good deal going into it. We want technical, financial, managerial, and operational capacity to be there. We want people to think of it as a sustainable solution for their communities, not as hey, we're just going to throw money at this problem and see what lands and what doesn't. So I think that's the overarching theme, and I'll let these guys talk the details.
All right, thank you.
I would just mention some of our grant programs. If you're in an area that is a poverty area, persistent poverty, or an economic need, or disaster area, or there's different extra points you can get on your application, or in some of our programs like intermediary relending program, if you've done it before and you've done it well, you get extra points. So there's various ways to get extra credit, but each program is different, and you really got to look at it and see what the eligibility requirements are and what would be to your advantage.
I would tell you that timing is important. If you look at our fiscal year, we've typically have gotten money January and December, January, February timeframe is when that money actually arrives at USDA. The funding arrives, and we have to obligate funds by September. So between March and I would say July is probably your best time, because we're working on applications, working with borrowers, working with people to make sure we utilize the best portion of those funds. If an application comes in September, it becomes a lot harder. You've got a lot more competition for those minor dollars. If your application is ready in March or April, it's probably going to be looked at whatever state funds have been allocated down to the state offices. And then if it doesn't get funded there, probably again at a national pooling time, it'll be looked at again. So I'd say the earlier you can do it, the more opportunity you have.
And I would definitely concur with Chad's comment, because oftentimes what we see is in the fourth quarter, the last 3 months of the fiscal year for the federal government, we see a spike in our applications. That's not good for you, and it's not good for us, and it's not good for the taxpayer. We want to make sure that we're making good, sound decisions. We don't want to have our entire year's volume in the last 3 months of the year. So your application will be more competitive the earlier you submit it. So.
Great. I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience, but before I do, is there anything I didn't ask you that you really feel like our county officials should know about your programs, or how they can increase their odds of being successful?
I'd ask them.
Okay. How about you guys? Any questions? We have one. Perfect.
I have a question about the Reconnect program. One of the difficulties in that is getting, and other broadband grant programs, is getting the certification of the existing speeds in areas that you're applying for grants for. There's companies that on the map claim that they have 25 gig, and in reality they have less than that. How can we overcome that to get more accurate figures? Because I work for a company that's applied for 4 or 5 of those grants. We've gotten one, but in one area they found one business that had the speed, and the whole grant was thrown out. How can USDA do a better job of getting more exact numbers in the speed?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think it's a good one. First of all, the focus is to get out to unserved areas. So we want to make sure we're getting out to areas that don't have 10-1 at the residential, not the business, the residential areas, because the businesses will get service. Oftentimes these companies are going in and they're cherry picking who they're delivering service to, but they're not getting it to the household level. And so the difficulty that we have is knowing who's served and who isn't served. And there's multiple tiers of solutions here. One is we're putting boots on the ground when we go out and verify service. We're not just relying on a desktop look at something. We're not just relying on the FCC's map or one entity's version of where it's served and unserved. And I'm not just taking it at face value when somebody comes in and challenges an application and says, hey, we're providing service in that area. I just don't go, oh, okay, we'll not go there. What I do is I make sure that there's a burden of proof. And so we have a service area validation guide that I would ask, if you're interested in looking into it in more detail, you go to the reconnect.usda.gov and you can look at all the eligibility requirements. There's a service area validation guide. I wanted to make sure we had transparency so that you can understand and look up the different desktop underwriting tools that we use prior to putting our boots on the ground, putting our general field rep out there to actually go out and talk with people and find out if there's service in that area at the household level. The other piece to this is trying to develop the mapping piece. The mapping piece, like I said, it's a multi-tiered solution. We have build-out requirements, so we're doing GIS level build-out requirements for folks that are receiving our awards. The FCC is updating their maps. They're getting more refined data. They're also requiring build-outs on things that they're doing. My job is to also work with them and the NTIA and other federal agencies as we work to develop these maps. NTIA is out there working with different state level governments with their state broadband managers to try and collect more detailed GIS level data. So your state governments have a key role to play. If you have GIS level data and your state is willing to share it with us, we'll take it. We'll use it in our underwriting process. We appreciate having better transparency because right now we're doing our best effort to do two things: get out to unserved areas, not overbuild, and expedite build out to those areas that need it. It doesn't do anybody any good for us to leave that money in our checkbook and not get it out there and get it used. But when we do it, we want to do it right. The other piece to this is this is a pilot program, so we've learned a few lessons. One of the things is just because one entity out in one area is getting service, we don't want that application to get completely kicked out because there's a de minimis issue. And in the first round, one of our categories of applications was if anybody had service in that area, it was automatically kicked out. We've made everybody go to a 90-10%, 90% unserved, 10% served. And there's a little bit of subjectivity in that, but the idea is we want to focus on getting out to the unserved areas. There's a huge need, and we have a lot of opportunity for those areas that are underserved if an incumbent is willing to go in and get a low interest loan, treasury rate loans. I mean, when you can get a loan at 2%, think about that. I mean, that's amazing. And you can repay it on a fixed basis over a 40-year period or 30-year period or 20-year period, however long your equipment lasts. That's phenomenal. So, you have to be willing to engage. Back in the 30s, most of the electric utility systems that were built out into rural areas was done on loans. So everybody wants to go after grant money today. Our fathers and our grandfathers and forefathers, all that, built it on loans, not just on grants. So.
Commissioner Joe Mullins from Flagler County, Florida. I want to kind of reiterate what you said. We've been working with a field rep out of Jacksonville, Andrew Hayes. Phenomenal guy. Been working with us real closely, carrying our hand through the application process, helping us with a lot of information. We've identified a few problems that they've kind of talked about here. A lot of the providers are claiming they have higher service in the area than they really do. And I'm on the Telecom and Telecommunications Steering Committee, a vice chair, and I think we need to really address them because I've actually had them at the house. I've shown them the speed, and the employees have ducked their head down and said, we know you're not getting it here, but we've been told by our supervisors to not to address this issue with you. And it came to a point where they picketed at the airports and stuff with us. But just to say that that field rep difference has been phenomenal. He has been really good at working with us and talking about it. Another area where we have challenges that he and I spoke about that need to be addressed are the mapping. Like you're saying, we've got this county went into competitive with the two major cities in it, and they started going annex crazy years ago. So they annexed a lot of land in. One of the cities qualifies for it. One of the cities doesn't because its core has 80,000 people and it's got fiber. But they annexed a tremendous amount of area that's getting knocked out, which is hurting other citizens. So the mapping is a little jaded.
I'll add another piece to that comment as well, is two things. USDA is not a regulatory enforcement agency. So the idea of advertised speeds versus other speeds, our folks can go out and do the verification for our funding. But if you want to change that, we're not the agency to address that piece of it. I'm careful in my wording there. But the other piece to that is we want to make sure that we're going out to unserved areas. And so We purposely are not using census blocks the way the FCC did it originally when they did the reporting requirements. I'm telling people, get granular. If you're trying to go out and deliver something into an area, get granular. The FCC has a Rural Digital Opportunity Fund for $16 billion. It's going out into unserved areas as well later on this year. They're going to open up that auction window. So if you're not going after our money, realize there's other money that's going to be coming available through the FCC, similar to what they did under the Connect America Fund reverse auction a few years ago. So we're not the only game in town, but we're the ones that are there right now and willing to build it and help you. So
I do want to say this too. I come originally from Augusta, Georgia, and they laid out the fiber a few years back, and I was part of that program with them. And it's the cyber capital of the world now. I mean, the jobs are unreal. We were pushing for 100,000 a year. They're 200,000 a year. Real estate's gone crazy. Taxes have been dropped for the first time. So this stuff works, but it's like you said, it's through grants and loan combinations that it was done.
yeah, this is unique. Reconnect has really helped in changing the game for broadband in rural America.
Got a question over here?
Yes, Phil Kyers from Ottawa County, Michigan. Kind of two questions here. We have a elementary school, the only school in the state of Michigan that was had PFAS in the water, so we got that. They're in a rural area. We can run water maybe a mile and a half, but they won't use enough water to keep the line clean. But we also have a greenhouse grower another half a mile down the road that is going to double his expansion. So he needs 1,500 gallons a minute, and the Eagle says no, you can't get your well permits. What's the chances that we can get a line and help from where would I go to do that?
I would start, first of all, with our state office in Michigan. Jason Allen is the state director in Michigan, and he is very engaged in that conversation and would love to be able to help you out. So Jason Allen is our state director in Michigan, and he should be your starting point for that, because you got a very granular question there, and he'd be the person to answer that. Sure.
Our next question.
I'm Betsy Coffey. I'm a county commissioner from Grand Traverse County in rural northern Michigan, lower Michigan, and I guess I have that middle child question. I am in a county of 93,000 people. It's one of the most populated counties in our rural area. However, so our city has 14,000. We've got some municipal broadband happening there, but we have a lot of townships. We are one of the few states that has townships who are very underserved in terms of broadband internet. And they're just a couple of thousand people. So what I'm trying to figure out is, as a county commission, can my county actually be a partner to these townships, or are we sort of disqualified because of our overall county population? And what advice would you have, besides talk to Jason Allen, which I heard, and I know Jason. He lives in my city.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I went up to Traverse City this last summer. Very, very beautiful place.
It is.
Yeah, it's. I'll get to your question here, but I'm going to segue just for a second. The electric co-ops, we had in Michigan last year, I think we put in over 900 miles of fiber optics for smart utility purposes. And if you have an area where you don't have fiber to the home, and let's say you have somebody already providing that service, they could partner and offer the extra capacity on that line to a provider if they needed to help up the game. And yes, but let me add to this. In Reconnect, we were very flexible in how we chose to deliver that option. So a county can apply. We've had a county in New York, and I think a few other counties in round one, who actually received awards for broadband. What we want to make sure of, though, is that you've got the financial capacity and the technical capacity to deliver on those services. And oftentimes the public utilities have that capacity because they do it for a living already. So, if you don't have that technical expertise locally, then I'd say partner with somebody that does, and you can be the recipient and just have the operating agreement and help manage your business for you in that regard.
The population doesn't matter.
The population does matter. It's got to be 20,000 or less for Reconnect in an unserved area.
It has to be for one of my local townships that has
Correct.
less than 20,000
Yes.
population. Got it.
Okay. Thanks. Our next question.
Sherry Moppin with Valley County, Idaho. We have a complex situation in that we are a growing community and looking for some affordable housing, and it's absolutely not available to us. Our building costs are $300 to $500 a foot now. So the developers that we are talking with, we are an opportunity zone. The builders that we are discussing this with said federal money that's available is putting an income cap on those living in these facilities of $15 an hour. We don't have anybody in our county, or I won't say anybody, but very few that actually meet that cap. So they're unwilling to build because they can't fill the facilities. So I'm wondering about pushing that $15 cap higher to allow us to provide housing for our nurses, our firefighters. Those are again, that middle child that is totally lost in federal funding and providing affordable housing. And they cannot afford their own based upon our building costs. So is there any talk about increasing that $15 cap? The other thing it's doing is it's disincentivizing people to work. I actually went in and did a presentation and budgeting with some people that live there. They're working part-time so that they're not kicked out of their housing.
Yeah, so we have under the Rural Housing Service, we have kind of a tiered system. There's a single family housing direct program. It's about $1 billion a year program, and it has some very stringent. It's meant for the low or very low income people. It goes up. There's a single family housing guaranteed loan program where we put guarantees on bank loans that are lending for single family housing. That's a very large program. It's a $25 billion guarantee program, and it's for, I would say that it goes up into the moderate level, and it's not based upon. It is based upon income. But it's also based upon the size of the family living at the household. So there's not like a $15 statutory cap. It's based upon there's a set of tables that HUD produces, which shows income depending upon the size of the family. So I think your best bet is I hate to say this, is to go back and talk to Jason Allen about what's allowed in those areas. There's under Mr. Allen, there's a single family housing program director that works there in the state of Michigan that would also be very familiar with the requirements and how it impacts the areas across Michigan. I'm sorry.
Lane Bangeter then. So
Yep.
yeah, Lane would be your main point of contact.
Thank you. Our next question.
My name is Jerry Alexander from Madison County, Indiana. I'm county councilman. And my question relates to this housing situation. At least in Indiana, a lot of the smaller communities used blight elimination program money, and they actually demolished a lot of houses that were blighted. I guess it was HOPE money or something that was actually apportioned to another program that allowed for communities to tear down these houses. But what that's created is a whole lot of vacant lots in these smaller communities. And the problem is that because of property values, when you're looking at appraisals, the houses next door might appraise in that area $85,000, $95,000. To build something, even a small 1,200 square foot house is $125,000, $150,000. And just about all of these communities in central Indiana that I've talked to are experiencing this problem, that they cannot get any builders to build on these vacant lots that now are vacant forever. They already have utility services, they have everything, but because the houses next door are, they're not going to get a market value that would justify a conventional loan. And I just wonder, how risky is the SBA when it comes to home ownership and lending to some of these people that want to build a new house? And how creative can you be? And I've talked to Mike Dora about this in Indiana, so I he doesn't really have the answer, doesn't know. But man, it's a real problem. At least in Indiana, I don't know whether it's in other states, but we have thousands and thousands of vacant lots now. And the smart city concept. The best place to build is not in the suburbs. The best place to build is somewhere where, when you're capitalizing on square footage and land utilization, it's in a lot that's already there, where it already has the utilities, and you're not having to bring it out to a suburb. What's the answer to this?
I think, first of all, you have to look at what is the demand in the area, because a developer is going to be, a contractor, they're going to be looking to go chase the money, and where can they get to quick turnaround on their funding. And so you have to make sure that there's sufficient demand for them building. They'll go and do a few spec homes, but they're not going to go out and, a bank's probably not going to allow them to go out and build 50 spec homes at a time in these smaller communities. If they do, I'd have to question that bank. They'd be very aggressive. So I think every time you look at this, it's going to have to be a local solution, and you're going to have to look at the demand for the type of housing that you're looking for. So starting with a housing study and then meeting that demand is key, because if there's just not the demand for it, you're going to make a bad situation worse because you potentially put people at risk.
Well, there is a demand. I mean, that's the problem. There's a demand. I'm just thinking of one community in Madison County that has the largest employer in the county is there, and they have a shortage of laborers. They're even offering a 5% down payment to employees that are willing to build, but still they're finding themselves upside down, and so there's a huge demand. As we all know, the economy is humming right along, and there's a lot of industry, and especially in Indiana, a lot of businesses are moving in, but people have to live outside the town and drive so far to get into those places of work, and that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it takes time for the housing piece to catch up with industry. There's no doubt about it, and there is no immediate silver bullet to solve the issue. I wish there was, but there's just not.
Housing's a tricky issue everywhere. Go ahead. In the back.
Kathy Binder, and I'm the chairman of two things, our Board of Supervisors and our Water and Sewer Authority. We have a unique challenge. We have in the past got under DEQ consent orders, and we have to take a wastewater plant and we have to decommission it or pipe it to another facility. We also live on the Rappahannock and the Potomac River, which is very heavily regulated because of the Chesapeake Bay Act, which causes unique challenges. We are a rural community still, but we are going to see a lot of development because of a new bridge coming over Maryland and because of the sprawl coming out from D.C. We're like at the end, Caroline County's in King George. My question is, we need to build a new wastewater plant, basically, to allow some development to help with our tax base. But the water treatment plant, we need to build a new one, will cost between $10 and $15 million. We've asked the state for different loans. There's not many available or grants. But my question is, how do you take a place like us who has a median income that's skewed because we have a military base that has a lot of engineers, so they have a high income, but a lot of our county is under $40,000. But when they look for grants and loans, they look at the median income, which is over $90,000, but that's not really our median income. And that one wastewater plant also services mostly our schools and our county offices in two small apartment complexes that are lower income. How can you take that data that we all talk about that gets skewed, and how can we apply for loans and grants that are more equitable to our community with our unusual circumstances? Thank you.
Another good question. It's the grant program that we deliver on is based off median household income. You can qualify for the 75% grant based on the fact that you're under a health violation order. So we, up to 7, instead of being limited at 45%, you can raise it to 75%, but it's still based off need. Okay, so this is the tricky part, because then you're getting very granular again. You have to have people who are willing to pay more than the other folks in those areas. So the solution could be who's willing to pay for what level of service. And it's difficult because if we look at a comparative value of what is the people, how much are people paying on their water bill or their wastewater bill, we have to compare that against similar systems in other places within the same state. And so if you're above that median, and you truly show a need and you're under an order, it is possible that you could qualify. Denise Lovelady is the one that handles it for Delaware and Maryland. And so she would be the starting point again. And you'd have to work with the state office there to really determine whether or not you can qualify and how to make sure you adjust your situation accordingly to be able to qualify for those grants. Again, it gets really granular really quickly, and you have to solve it at that level. It's not something we can, I can't sit here today and say, here's your solution, but I would start there.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm from LaFleur County in Mississippi, and I'm on the Board of Supervisors, and my question has to deal with the broadband to rural areas. Now, we just passed our legislation to allow our co-ops to provide this on last year. Now, in bringing broadband to poor people, a lot of times they can't afford it. So my question is, are there grants available that a municipality or county could apply for, whereas a hub or a hotspot may be set up at various spots in poor communities where people could access the internet?
I'm going to talk a little bit about a slightly different program that falls under broadband. It's called Community Connect, and it's for the smaller communities, and it's for the areas that are unserved. And whoever goes in and receives this award, and it's going to be a provider usually that applies for it, they're required to put in a community resource center that is available for free for people to use. So that's a different competitive program, but it solves the same problem that you have. And so that's one way of doing it. The FCC has their Universal Service Fund. It goes into high-cost areas to help reimburse providers to go into those areas. That's the whole reason for it. It goes for schools. It goes for critical care facilities, all kinds of things. So they get a reimbursement on the back end of their operating expenses to go in to provide these to different areas. We provide the money up front, and we can help with the capital construction, but we're not there to provide the operating expense reimbursement. So we can help in that regard, but there's other federal agencies that kind of help on the other side of that.
Great. We have one more back here.
I'm from Randolph County, North Carolina, Darrell Fry. You mentioned rural hospitals. Is that capital related, operationally related? What are those opportunities? Is it for new construction versus to sustain an existing hospital?
So for hospitals under the Community Facility Direct Program, Guaranteed Loan Program, and even under the grant program, typically we're involved in either new hospital construction, renovation of a hospital facility, or the purchase of major medical equipment for the facility. Grant funds tend to go towards some of the equipment and smaller cost items, direct loan and guaranteed loan funds, often in combination with each other, a certain amount of direct and a certain amount of guarantee into a hospital construction or renovation project.
Great. So that's going to be the last of our questions. You might be able to catch these gentlemen before they go off to lunch, but there's also the Federal Resource Center located in the Cardozo Room, where USDA Rural Development representatives are on hand to continue these conversations. Because it hurts my feelings when I see everybody sneaking out to go get a good seat at lunch. So we've got to finish up. Please join me in thanking these gentlemen for their time today.